Welcome to another series in the Black Male Impact series. My name is Dr. Richard A. Cross, and we have as guest this evening Dr. Lamont Moore. Dr. Moore, welcome to another session in the Black Male Impact, which today we'll be talking about transformation through intentional impact. Um, I know you have been in education for over 25 years, and that is really commendable when you hear that we need more Black men in the space of education. The research have shown or said that when a Black man is in that space, students do better. Not just Black male students, but all students. And I know you're currently the director of testing. But before we get into the conversation itself today, I will ask you to share more about yourself, your work, and the impact before we start the question today. So, Dr. Moore, welcome again to the Black Male Impact.
And thank you so much, Dr. Cross, for having me. This is my second time being with you and talking about the experiences and the impact of a Black male in education. So I'm excited to be here. Just a little bit about who I am. And just as you said, this is year 24 for me in education, 25 actually. And so I've been educating students for quite some time. And I know personally the impact of the Black male in the educational arena. So I've had the opportunity to serve as a teacher. A lot of my time I spent looking at students who are gifted and talented, identifying those students, serving those students, helping to create programs for those students. I've also served as assistant principal of instruction. I've also worked as a state director in South Carolina. And so, again, working with those programs to support our students who have gifts and talents in the state, making sure that they have the services that they need, and those educators are trained to work with those students. I also spent time as a principal in two school districts in South Carolina, so got a chance to actually lead in the building. My doctorate is in educational leadership, and my dissertation was actually focused on underperforming gifted and talented students. So looking at how we can identify that issue and how we can get ahead of those students who show promise at the beginning, but in high school they seem to uh, fall through the cracks. So looking at administrative perceptions for that. So currently I work in the Sumter School District as the Director of Testing, Accountability, Gifted and Talented, and Title III, which looks at our students who are multilingual learners and who are new to the country, who are learning the English language, supporting those staff members and schools as we transition those students into the educational arena. So I've had the opportunity. I feel like I'm blessed to have had the opportunity to work in a variety of different arenas within education. And so that's kind of afforded me to see education from a variety of perspectives. And that definitely informs my work and what I do with schools now. So, uh, going back to that whole Black male impact, I've seen Black men in multiple spaces in education. And in all of those spaces, I've seen the impact on students, on just the perspective that they bring to the table. And really, even with sitting down having conversations about where education is to go, making sure that that perspective, the Black male perspective, is being represented in those conversations. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about intentional impact tonight.
And thanks, man, for being here, and also thanks for your commitment
Absolutely.
in the space of education. And again, it is something that we hear a lot about, and how important it is for us as Black men to be in those spaces. Not just for Black male students, but as you said, it's important that our voices are, heard, so we can share from our perspective what we believe will be of benefit to the students. because our experience may be different, so our perspective may be different. What we need to achieve our goals may be different. So it's important, that we are there sitting at the table to
Absolutely.
state the things that we believe will be beneficial to the students and to the success of the overall, school or wherever we are as Black men. As you said, the goal today is just to talk about our impact and intentional impact. But before we get into even the question itself, I want to ask you who is your Black History leader and why?
Definitely, hands down, Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And I know everyone probably says that's my favorite, but he's a hero for me because he not only affected his generation, but his impact created a legacy. And I think that's what everyone strives for. Hopefully, I know I strive to do that in your work. He affected generations within his time, and he's still his work and his passion for civil rights and for equality still speak volumes to us today. And he's needed even now in today's world. So he's definitely my hero, and that's why, because it's not he did not just serve a movement or a moment,
Yeah.
but he impacted generations and created a legacy that quite a few people try to live up to and try to extend and continue and follow in those footsteps to champion the very ideals that he stood for.
I agree. He's the definition of selflessness.
Yes,
He was doing the work that benefits everyone. And
absolutely.
that's something you have to have the heart for. You
Yeah,
have to have the desire for. You have to have the patience for. You have to have the commitment for. Because
yeah,
it takes a lot, and we have seen and heard, not really seen directly, but from history and from his experiences, and those who were there with him have witnessed some of the healed treatment that he experienced, but that didn't stop him from continuing. He was serving until his last day
yes.
on this earth, and that is commendable, and that takes a lot of courage. To be hated, to be doing something that is beneficial to humanity, and to be
Mhm.
doing it. That takes tremendous courage to really make that kind of sacrifice. And just like you, a lot of people will say Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King,
Yeah.
is their hero and trailblazer. So we can't even talk enough about the good work that
Oh yeah.
have committed himself to do. But we're going to, hopefully we may, we'll see where the conversation goes. But, we're going to look into personal transformation and growth. Um,
Okay.
so, can you share a defining moment in your life that sparked your journey toward intentional impact? Why did you want to go into education?
Well, I will start. I'll give a couple defining moments. Up until my senior year in high school, I actually was very committed to work in the field of law. I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I had a bad experience, and I know this may be shocking, but I had a couple bad teachers in high school. And I remember reflecting on it, and I said, there's so many ways that this experience could have been different for me and my classmates. And so that's when the desire to educate came in. I said, maybe I need to, maybe that's my contribution to the world, that I become an educator. Sometimes it's hard to believe that you had a non-example of an educator that kind of inspired you, but that kind of changed what I wanted to do. Um, and so when I went into education, so that was one defining moment in high school where I changed my mind about what exactly I wanted to major in college. And so when I went to college and I went on some several college tours, um, there was a specific program called Center for Teaching Excellence that was housed at my alma mater, Livingstone College, which is Salisbury, North Carolina. And they were seeking African American males who wanted to be educators. They were going to have a organized program for them. They would give you a full ride, pay for your tuition, books, all of that for 4 years. But it was in exchange for you being in this program of scholars and also working in North Carolina for the first 3 years of your career. So in exchange for that, you got a full ride, and they were going to provide you with leadership opportunities, almost uh, immediate mentors and peers. And so that was a defining moment. Being around other men like myself, or young men at the time, who had a passion for education, also working with them to set goals for myself personally, and that energy, that atmosphere started something within me to want to make an impact, because it was almost like we were just in one place and we were just all in that same mindset to make a difference for students that look like us. And so worked with them, and that I had peers that were aspiring to be what I wanted to be, and so you immediately had role models. You had um, staff members that really worked with you to they wanted to see you succeed, and so that nurturing environment, that particularly that program, was a defining moment for me. And so I knew once I got into education, I wanted to make sure that I made an impact, and that it wasn't just about having a job. It wasn't just about um, being successful after college. It was really about what we've talked about with Martin Luther King, making an impact on the next generation, being a
Correct.
part of a legacy, continuing a trend of excellence for students of color.
And I think that is important, as you said, continuing a trend of excellence. And one of the questions that I would normally ask, do you enjoy being in education? But with over 25 years, you must have enjoyed it. But for some, like black men or black boys who may not hear from a lot of black men, when it comes to teaching, right? And they may not know the value. What would you say to those black males who may not be looking in education or looking to become a teacher? Being that you got an opportunity at a young age and you saw where it could benefit you. But what would you say to a young black male who may not be looking that direction but could be a great benefit to him?
I really would have a conversation, not like a sales pitch for education, but I would really have a conversation about, what that particular young man would want to do. What do you want your contribution to be? Because realistically, education may not have the most competitive salaries, but what education does provide for those educators is that satisfaction that you're making a difference in the lives of people. And if that's the motivation, if that's what gives you satisfaction, if that's your driving force to make a difference in society, to make sure that you're contributing to the next generation, education is the place to be. You have almost an immediate recognition of your impact once you enter into those classrooms, especially for Black men. Um, just because you're not the norm in a lot of different locations. They don't see a lot of Black male educators. And so the students are just going to study you. They're going to almost sit right at your feet, wanting to know, what is your perspective? What would you say about what we need to do as we're becoming adults and we're growing and we're learning? And so your voice in those spaces carries a lot of weight. And so, to that young man that's trying to figure out what path should I go, I would appeal to his intellect and to his desire just to make a difference in humanity. And that would be what we have that discussion on. And, depending on how that conversation goes, of course, I'll talk about the connections to education. And, for a lot of black men, we may not have had that experience of having a black male teacher growing up. And, just appealing to that side, how do we think that would have changed the trajectory of our lives personally? So for a lot of men, we see that connection through sports, and
Yeah.
so we like to coach. And education is essentially the same thing. You're just coaching students academically, so
Yeah.
making connections there, you know, um, and the reward not being necessarily something financial, but the reward is making better people, making better citizens, creating a stronger and more intellectual generation that is going to take what we've started and what we've has been passed on to us, take it to the next level. And
Yeah, I agree.
so I think that's the most appealing part to black men or anybody really going into education. That it's not some a place that you go to get rich. It's a place that you make people rich mentally and academically, and so just appealing to that part of their nature.
Yeah, and I do agree with you, especially being in that space. As they always said, it's easier to become what you see. So the more they see us in those spaces, our spaces, they may have that desire to
Hmm.
be a teacher. Especially, although you making the decision, it wasn't because
Yeah.
you had a great teacher, but because you wanted to become a great teacher for
Mhm.
students. And sometimes it happens like that, and sometimes it's because of a great teacher. Some become a teacher themselves. So my next question to you is, what daily habits or routines do you practice to ensure you are growing and evolving as a leader?
I am always looking for opportunities to stretch myself. So I am a lifelong learner, and I teach students to be a lifelong learner. And so that's a principle that I adopted for myself. So I never think that I've learned it all. I'm always looking for things that are new and innovative to add to my skill set. So if that means studying the latest and the best practices in education, if that means researching things that could help me in my work with schools and with districts, if that means attending professional development, going to conferences and workshops, and finding out about things that I may not be the expert in or want to learn more about. So I try to feed that hunger of wanting to be a lifelong learner, uh, doing things that may be out of my comfort zone. For years, I liked just being in the classroom. I didn't want to have a national stage or do anything as far as at conferences, but that was something I hadn't experienced. So I pushed myself to write those proposals, to go to different conferences and present in front of people and create content that they wanted to hear and that they could take back to them and make them better as educators. And so honing that wasn't easy. And that definitely wasn't my comfort zone initially. And so becoming comfortable in that, watching people who were very good at it, asking questions, and just really trying to add to my skill set. Not being satisfied and thinking, hey, I've learned a lot. This is these 20 years I've been in this. I know this. No, it's always something that you can learn, something you can add to your cadre of skills, something that you can, someone that you can learn from. And so always looking for who's doing it better. How can I lean on them? How can I glean from them? And how can I take ideas and adopt them and make them my own? And so I'm always trying to learn. And so daily I'm looking at different things and trying to figure out, even from one year to the next. Because when you're in education, it's a cycle. And so you've done something before and you feel like, oh, let's just do what we did last year. But always looking for ways to even um, outperform how I did something before. So competing with myself to make my processes and my protocols or whatever I'm working on better than what they were the year prior. So that's what I would say is my routine. Just always trying to be better and always wanting to be resourceful to people. When I'm meeting with people, making sure I have some great ideas that I can leave some information that I can add that takes that conversation or that discussion to the next level and leave a situation better than it was when I joined it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for sharing that, and I think that is important, especially being a lifelong learner. And if you're going to be a leader, actually, that is important, because
Hmm.
you got to keep up with what's going on, so you can be as effective as possible. And again, as a leader, there are people who are looking up to you, so whatever habits they see that you practice, they will kind of take on those same behaviors. And we have to be mindful of that people are watching us, people are looking to us. And it doesn't mean that we have to in a leadership position, because we're leaders wherever we are. But
Hmm.
that lifelong habit, to learn more, or have that desire to learn more, it should be something that we practice regardless of being in a leadership position, because again, we're leading
Yeah.
wherever we are, and we have to always keep that in mind, especially knowing that there are young people, especially who are looking up to us. So, that is one thing. But I really appreciate you sharing that perspective, because lifelong learning is something that, we all have to practice, especially if we want to make a positive impact and change the lives of those who we are entrusted to serve. My next question to you, and a lot of people, have this kind of difficulty when it comes to self-doubt. But how do you overcome self-doubt and limiting beliefs when striving for transformation? Because you
So
just kind of shared it. Actually, you come out of your comfort zone, but how did you make that happen?
So you have to monitor your self dialogue. And I know sometimes we don't like to talk about that because people feel like I don't talk to myself, but there's always an internal dialogue that is going on. And what you say to yourself that probably no one else knows is so critical in how you make decisions and what you believe and how far you go. You can have the greatest team surrounding you. You can have the best motivating spouse or partner or best friend, but it's what you tell yourself, your self thoughts, those thoughts that you listen to and rehearse in your mind when no one else knows. That's going to make or break you. So when you have those doubting thoughts that kind of come across your mind, and it's important to not dwell on them. It's important to recognize that they are not positive and to not feed into it. So it starts there. Being able to have that mental fortitude to say, okay, and we all have those moments where we kind of sulk, But I always say, you take 5 minutes to do that. Anything longer than 5 minutes is not healthy. So you have those moments where you're just being real and you're venting even to yourself or to someone. After that, pull yourself together, snap back into positive thinking. So, the amount of time you stay in that space of self doubt is a direct correlation to how successful you're going to be. Um, and so that's step one. I try to monitor what I tell myself. A lot of people like to incorporate affirmations, and I love affirmations. I use them with my students because that directly combats how you think about yourself.
Correct.
Um, Also, I love quotes. I'm a quote guy, so I love just finding a insightful quote. I like to pull quotes from all over, from the Bible, from scholars, from experts in the field, and I try to apply those in everything that I do. Presentations, when I'm talking to people, even when I'm just reflecting myself. I love to study what wise words and just kind of chew on those mentally. But as far as habits, I always try to set some ambitious goals and make sure that I have some scheduling and some action and some planning that goes behind those goals. So they're not just dreams. I've added some action steps to it. And that's really what motivates me. Meeting goals, meeting objectives, that kind of pulls me out of sometimes we have those low moments where we just kind of say, "Oh, I didn't make that. I didn't hit the mark here." But just moving on to the next thing, not dwelling there. And so that's the way I do it. But it all starts with monitoring what I tell myself, because I've had situations where everybody was motivating me about a situation, but I was discouraged about it. And until I got to a point where, I heard a writer say, encouraged myself,
Yeah.
uh, no matter what encouraging words they had, no matter how supportive my network was, I wasn't able to move until I settled that within my own self. And so I always say it starts with your self talk, monitoring that, because sometimes we don't think about it, but being intentional, like we have been talking about, to say, what am I listening to? What am I telling myself? And how can I get control of that?
Yeah, I think that is important, especially self talk. A lot of
Mhm.
us talk ourselves out of doing things that we want to do. And sometimes
Mhm.
we talk ourselves out of doing it because we don't have the example. We don't have
Yep.
people around us who have demonstrated success in those spaces, who have, achieved on the levels that we want to achieve. So sometimes, in that moment, we may be saying, I don't think I can because no one who I'm close to ever. And what we have to do,
It's true.
especially as Black men, remind ourselves that sometimes the success that we envision, that we desire, maybe become the example for those around us. So we cannot talk ourselves out of, doing the things that we want to do
Yeah.
because even though we may not have an example, personal example, we may be the one to become the
Mhm.
example. And you hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes when it comes to achieving big goals, that man, I don't think I can. And some may have tried before and
Yeah.
failed, and not realizing that your next attempt could be what lead to success.
Mhm.
But that also, in that same realm of talking themselves out of what they want to do. But that's a great reminder because self-talk cause a lot of people not to
Yeah.
pursue what they want because they are afraid of the opinions of others. They are afraid of failure. And some people are afraid of achieving success.
Absolutely.
So they talk themselves out of it because success do comes with responsibility. But I'm going to shift gear a little bit from personal transformation to community and collective impact. Because one thing that I have realized when it comes to us and making an impact and creating positive change, we cannot do this by ourselves. We
Mhm.
have to, join forces, but it's not always the easiest thing for us to join forces. So, my first question to you is what do you believe are the biggest challenges Black men face today, and how can we address them?
I I think one of the biggest problems is unity within the the black community as a whole, but also amongst black men. And not unity in the sense that, the traditional sense of, we're all rooting for one another, but unity in the fact that I'm not competing against my brother. I think there's a lot of unhealthy competition that happens with black men, and there's a lot of factors that may have contributed to that. A lot of times when you move into spaces, um, there's only a few of us in certain spaces, a few of us who have those seats at the table, a few of us who are graced with the opportunity to operate at high levels or in spaces that are, very lucrative. And because of that, we feel the need to compete with one another, or that we are uh, separate or have a unique skill set, or there's something uniquely about us that other our peers don't have, as far as other black men. And so that creates a dynamic that battles against the unity. And so I think the way we get ahead of that is just by acknowledging, acknowledging who we are and acknowledging, regardless of your status, regardless as to what you've achieved in life, being able to just see one black man at the same level that you see yourself. And even though that sounds simple, I think sometimes it's missing in a lot of the interactions we have, even between each other. And so it starts with that unity. It starts with wanting other black men to be in spaces for those who may have achieved to that level, where it seems like, hey, there's only the three of us in this group, in this at this level. And so wanting to see your brothers who look like you and sound like you in that space, who share that cultural heritage with you. So it first starts by wanting to be a part of that unit and preserving that unity. I think going back to that unhealthy competition, we compete so much, and men are naturally competitive anyway.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't serve us well, and it creates a divide within our community with among black men. And I think if we were able to really get a handle of that and make sure that even though we may be competing, it's not unhealthily, and allowing that unity to really grow and solidify within our segment of the world and in our interactions among with each other, I think that would kind of solve a lot of the issues.
I,
I can
I,
use
I
an
do.
example to kind of bring it home.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do agree with you. Unity is one of the things that we have to really get a hold of.
yeah.
Because, but we have been conditioned for years, and it's still maybe in our DNA to
Mhm.
have this distrust amongst each other, because we have been conditioned to hate and not liking each other. And
Yeah. Yeah.
if we're not fully aware of our behaviors towards each other, that cycle continues. It's just to come to that place within ourselves to know that this is not helping. It doesn't matter how
Mhm.
good we are, or how talented we are, and we are very talented. We
Yes.
are very gifted people, but for how influential we are, because the world follows us, for not achieving to the levels that we are capable. It just shows, as you mentioned, that the unity, and that's been socially engineered within the community, for us to hate each other. And
Mhm.
I think, I don't know who was saying, I was listening to something recently, or someone recently, and they were saying that today, in today's society, we shouldn't be boasting that I'm the only black person in my organization, especially when
Yes.
we are in leadership roles.
Mhm.
Especially if you're in a leadership role, I think you should be trying your very best to open the door for someone else. We should not go in no space and close the door behind us. We must
Absolutely.
be the door opener for someone else. And what we also have to understand, numbers do work. When you have like-minded persons within the space with you, it helps to amplify your voice.
Yes.
That's unity. It helps to amplify our voices. It helps to make things easier to get past when we have someone else there like us who will support. Other people will support what we're trying to do, but
Yeah.
as you mentioned, that unity.
Yeah. And having more people in that space does not dim your light, and us knowing that it doesn't take anything from you or your accomplishment because you have more people who look like you in that space, and that you're not a gatekeeper, but you're making sure that you bring people along. I was going to give that example. We see it all over history, but I was talking about Martin Luther King earlier. But
Yeah,
as great as a leader if he was, during that same time we had Malcolm X.
yeah,
And what did we do? We compared the two of them. We always do, as
Yep.
if they were competing forces. We do it in music uh, uh, with Tupac
100%
and
do.
Biggie, or
Yep.
you can go down the list with talented, reputable leaders, black men. But we love to compare. We love to say, well, who's the best? Why? They're both great. They're both making a difference in communities. But moving past that whole, I'm competing and I'm trying to be the number one. And although it's impressive and
Yeah.
for some people to look at, it does tear at the fibers of unity.
It does. It breaks down our community, and it's ongoing. And we have to realize that, despite having challenges with systems and policies, I think if we come together and work towards goals strategically, despite the systems, we can achieve so much, because the systems are
Mhm.
going to be there. We can change those,
Yeah,
but we have demonstrated how resilient we are, and how creative and how innovative and
yeah,
how resourceful we are. With those traits, with those characteristics, you know, I strongly believe we can achieve so much, despite policies or systems that are not so much our favor.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah, because man, I tell you, remember W.E. Du Bois talks about the talented tent, where
Hmm.
10% of the black community supposed to uplift the next part of the black community, and we have more than 10% of the black
Yeah.
community who are tremendously successful.
Hmm.
But I think we may have adapt a selfish
Yeah.
outlook, and I think that also affecting us. We have to realize that um, some of the doors that needs to be opened, we have to open them. We cannot count on other people to open doors for us that we are capable of opening. But we can continue on that conversation, but I
Oh
want
yeah.
to go into another question, still on community and collective impact. How do you shift from individual, which is kind of what we're just talking about, shift
Hmm.
from individual success to collective advancement in our community? What are your thoughts on that, and how can we do it?
I think it goes right back to what we were saying, moving past selfishness and the desire to just be a part of a moment. You know, a community, an individual success story is about a moment in time, a moment in a person's life. But making community impact and impacting generations and creating a legacy, that's about a movement. So it's the shift is really, do you want to be part of a moment or do you want to be part of a movement? So it starts by educating our community, educating ourselves to push beyond just me and mine to how can I impact the community at large? How can I create a situation, experience, a lifestyle that extends beyond just me and my family, or just me and my community, to something that's more global in its impact. So I think it starts in our mindset, having those discussions that challenge a limited or fixed mindset that keeps us boxed into, hey, we had a successful moment, so let's just live here, let's stay here. Those leaders such as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they had such a broad and forward thinking. Their mindset was just so advanced that they were not just concerned about the experience of their own family in that moment, because quite frankly, just studying their lives, their personal families took a hit
Correct.
because of their courageous stance. And so that did not deter them, because their mind and their focus was on what is the global impact. So not just being concerned about winning the battle, but how can we win the war? and what's the series of events that needs to happen to create this momentum that is going to be unstoppable. And
Correct.
so, I think that comes from having deep conversations, that comes from challenging that mindset that just wants us to kind of stay selfish. And as long as my personal life is great, as long as my personal family is prospering, then I'm good. But pushing beyond into saying, how can you now make this something that's contagious? When I think about those leaders, their lifestyle, their stance, their goals, the way they led was contagious. It was infectious almost in a positive way, to where it became almost it became a movement. It
Yeah.
became more than just one man's passion or one community's passion. It became something that was international, that was global, and that permeated beyond just this moment in time. And so I think sometimes we get so caught up in, how can I make my space livable and enjoyable, that it limits us from making such a huge impact. And so you have to be intentional, like we've been talking about, to make an impact at that level. You have to be strategic in your thinking. You have to be focused on outcomes and evidence based initiatives, and you have to be driven despite what may be happening in that moment in time, because you're focused on what's going to happen in the future.
Man, well said. That's a great perspective. But I will repeat what you said. Not just being part of a moment,
Hmm.
but part of a movement,
Hmm.
which do takes um, courage for one, and also have to let go of the selfishness, because that becomes inclusive
Yeah.
when it comes to being part of a movement, not a moment. As you mentioned, that yes, it's good to be first to do this, and first to be here, and first to get this. But if things are going to change, not just for this current generation, but for generations to come, there are certain things that we have to do today for the next generation to be in a better position. And we have to realize that there are certain things that we are still dealing with today, maybe
Hmm.
from a policy or system perspective, but there are certain things that we can do differently, that if will make a drastic change to some of the things that we are currently dealing with today. But that goes to, as you shared, it's not only to be a part of a moment,
Hmm.
but to be a part of a movement. And that's
Hmm.
how we're going to move the needle
Hmm.
and see more of us achieving, um, success. I think, that is really critical as we go forward. And it's something that I'm going to stick a note on, because, that is an important topic to address as we go forward on
Absolutely.
this journey. Not focus on these moments, but focus on the movements that will move the needle and challenge the status quo. And as I shared yesterday, that we have to realize that we are the history makers
Mm.
of
Yes.
today. We are writing history. What will it be
Hmm.
about us? When the
Absolutely.
next generations when they're talking, are they still going to be talking about what happened 100 years ago by black men and black women and what they do? Or we are going to now be a part of the conversation, which is really, really important. And that's where we have to get to that point, as you shared, not
Hmm.
just part of a moment, but part of a movement that create great change. Man, I really like
Yeah.
that perspective that you shared. It is really important as we go forward. But my next question to you: um, how do we move from just talking about solutions to implementing real, lasting change?
I always say, when I think about, I hear that question, I think about the barbershop. You know, that's like for black men, that's our haven. We come in. There's no limits to the conversations we have, but we have some of the greatest ideas that come up in those barbershop conversations. But when we leave the barbershop, maybe 10, 20% of those things that we just talked about actually come into fruition. But the things that make that impact, so you talk about moving from just having great ideas to actually seeing that change, it comes from planning. It comes from strategic planning. It comes from taking those great ideas and putting legs to those ideas. And it's what I call strategic planning 101. Everyone has goals or dreams, but your dreams don't become goals until you add some action steps to them. And you're not only just adding action steps, but you're monitoring, you're holding yourself accountable for going after those goals, and you're having something that's measurable. How are we going to say? When are we going to double check to see? We talk about in the barbershop, for example, how we need to have a safer neighborhoods. But where does it go after that? It goes into some strategic planning sessions where we are intentional about saying, this is a great idea. So, how are we going to make it happen? So, we've talked about what should happen. Now, let's talk about how we're going to make it happen. Who are the players that need to be at the table? How can we create a neighborhood center? How can we create clean playgrounds where we don't have situations? I'm just using all of those as examples. But it's a commitment that just does not get stuck in talking about the problem, but you're moving from being a problem identifiers to being solution identifiers. You're looking for solutions now. Everyone can point out the problem, but not many people can identify solutions to the problem. And so that takes a lot of concerted effort, that takes a lot of intentional effort, that takes accountability, that we're just not going to have a conversation where we vent. We're actually going to respond. I look at data all day. I look at a variety of data, and I always tell people data gives one part of the story, but you have to respond to it. You have to own it. You have to accept that this is true. You have to say, now what is our plan to respond to this so that we change things that we don't like to see in the data. And so we talk about statistics that affect Black men and Black communities all the time, and they may be daunting, but it takes a commitment to just not stop at talking about the daunting statistics, but how can we affect change to change those same statistics that we were just talking about? So how do we move from those barbershop conversations that everyone connected to let's have some meetings. Let's have a strategic plan in place. Let's talk about how we can affect change, how we can respond to things that we don't like to see. But what you'll find is a sad reality sometimes. The people are very infatuated with the problem, talking about it, complaining about it, getting people to rally behind why they disagree with the realities of society. But very few people are courageous enough to push past that to say, okay, we've talked about the problem for 2 years now. What are we going to do to address it? And sometimes we can be guilty of that. And that's why I like to think about the barbershop, because we all have been there. We've had those experiences where we said, that was a great conversation with Black men really talking about some deep issues.
Correct.
But you leave the barbershop and you don't have things that say, okay, where do we go with this? And so having leaders in place to say, we're not going to let the conversation just stay here. We're going to do something about it.
Right. I would say well said. Because we are great at pointing out the problem,
Hmm.
um, but we don't come up with the solutions. Or
Hmm.
even if we do mention solutions, as you mentioned, we don't create a plan to execute
Mhm.
those solutions. And sometimes, you know, go back to what you said earlier about, you know, talking ourselves out of doing what we think about doing. I think sometimes even with the solutions, because people are looking at how long it's going to take to create change. And it may
Mhm.
not be to change the world, but to create a better opportunity for one person or a group of people. And sometimes that's what a solution
Yeah.
will do. It may not change the entire United States, it may not change the entire world, but it may change or save one person's life. And I
Mhm.
think, you know, we have to realize that even though we may not have all the resources, you know, because that's a great perspective uh, that you shared, where we identify these problems. We are good at identifying problems.
Mhm.
And you know, and to be honest with you, that's one thing that, you know, people always like, people come to me if I'm working and they're talking about, you know, the problems. I always, you know, kind of feel some, not really push back to some extent, but I was saying, what's the solution? You know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
anyone can point out what's wrong.
Yeah.
That's easy because that's visible to everyone, and that don't really take any real thinking. The solutions takes real thinking. You know, we have to sit and we have to contemplate what we can do to make this better.
Yes.
And, you know, some people, I don't know if they're afraid of thinking, you know, but they said that's one of the hardest thing to do. A lot of people don't think, they just go with what is happening around them. But if we're going to create change, we have to be thinkers. You know, we have to be
Yeah.
doers. We have to be courageous. You know, but that is something that we need to really sit with ourselves as a
Mhm.
community. The problems are there. What are the solutions? When
Right.
we identify this, go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with what you were saying. So many times we major in problem identification, but that's only one part of the process. It's necessary. You need to
Yeah,
know what the problem is, but between problem identification and problem resolution, that whole intentionality, and intentionality is about being proactive other than reactive. Identifying the problem in a sense is reactionary.
yeah,
We're reacting to something that has not worked, and so now we're identifying what did not work. But finding solutions is like, let's get ahead, let's plan, let's make sure that this problem does not repeat itself. And so in order to do that, you have to be forward thinking, you have to be proactive, and you have to be and that takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of, you can't really do it yourself. Sometimes you can identify a problem yourself all day, but solving a problem requires a collective effort. It requires some people that may be smarter than you, that may have an expertise that you don't have. It requires pulling people together to sit them at the table to say, hey, what do you see from your perspective? And so it does require a lot of energy and planning and thoughtfulness, but it always is worth the time. It's just whether or not are we going to have the time and energy to devote to it. And I say that we should kind of really target that more and kind of challenge ourselves to put the work in.
you know, and that is so important. Being proactive and being willing to work together, because you know those two are really, really important. And for those who are here, I don't know what just happened, but I will say that was a great point by Dr. Moore about, you know, working together, coming together to solve the problems that we see happening in our communities. You know, we have to take that responsibility, you know, to change the things that we can change. And some of the changes will take a group of individuals to create those change. But if it takes a group, let's form those groups. And let's understand that it's not about I get ahead, you get ahead. It's about us getting ahead. It's about creating better communities, better future for those who we really care about. And so it's important. So I was just letting them know what you just stated about being proactive and how it's important that we come together and work together to create the changes that we want to see. Because again, we have to know that this is not about me and you individually, and we have to get past that. We no one will be here forever, and our responsibility should be to make the place better than we found it. And a part of making it better um, includes working with each other, and get past that ego, get past that I'm only taking care of myself, because a lot of us are here where we are in the positions that we are in because of other people. And sometimes it may not be direct, it could be indirect, because of someone's courage, because of someone's selflessness, make it possible for us to be in these spaces, having the things that we have today. So it's important. I know we're getting close to the end of the session, and I still have a few more questions that I want to ask, but I'm still going to ask the question. And this section that I want to go into before we get to the end of our conversation today about intentional leadership and legacy. And we have talked about a lot of things that we need to do, and what we need to start doing more of, and how important it is for us to work together and make sure we're not talking ourselves out of doing the things that we feel compelled to do, because we do sometimes because we're thinking about people, we're thinking about the possibility of failing, but achieving success or creating great impact, comes with adversity, setbacks, and disappointments. So, that's part of the journey. But it is a part of the journey. So, but this question that I have for you is, what does intentional leadership mean to you, and how you embody it in your work as a leader? I'm I'm not hearing you. I'm still let's see. Yeah, I'm still not hearing Dr. Moore. Um, yeah, the volume is up. Um, yeah, so just and this is a question that we all can think about, especially if we are consider ourselves as leaders. What does that look like for you as a leader? What does intentional leadership mean to you? And intentional leadership, if I should say, is that as leaders, we must lead by examples. We must demonstrate what we are telling others to do. Because it's one thing to say what we're going to do, the next thing is to do it. We must walk the talk, and not just because of our sake, but again, people are looking up to us. People are looking to model what they see us do. And Dr. Moore is back. Let's see if we can hear um, his audio.
Okay.
Yes, I'm hearing you now. So
Is there a
the
lag?
question, yes, the question is, what does intentional leadership mean to you, and how do you embody it in your work?
So intentional leadership to me, it talks about, it really focuses on a leader who's proactive. They have a vision that extends beyond themselves. We kind of talked about that earlier tonight, and we mentioned quite a few of those leaders who are intentional. But this is a leader who thinks beyond just their scope of influence
Okay.
and thinks about the legacy that will come after him or her. And so, an intentional leader is one who's very strategic in thinking, has a vision that extends beyond them personally, and they have a commitment to see that vision through, despite the current status or despite setbacks or barriers. So, these are courageous leaders that are very strategic in their thinking, very action oriented, and they have a vision that extends probably beyond them. They're very passionate about leaving a legacy that can be carried on even in their absence. And so that's what I think about with intentionality and how it impacts the leadership. And so
Yeah.
hopefully, I know we've had some technical issues. Hopefully everything came through. I see that
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a lag on my end. Uh,
Yes, but I'm hearing you
but yeah,
clearly, and as you said, a leader from an intentional standpoint must be proactive, must have a vision beyond self, and must be committed despite the challenges. And it takes courage to be a great leader. But before we end today, we are almost at the end of um, this session, which, from my end, and listening to you and what you have shared, the conversation is great. You have shared great insights and perspectives that we all can apply as we go forward on this journey. So my final question to you, well, I may ask another question, but my final question from what I have listed here to ask you, if you could leave one message for young black men striving for impact, what would it be?
I would definitely, my message would be to the measure of your impact is more than what you've done in that moment. We've talked about moment. The measure of your impact is how well you have influenced the movement to the next generation. So we've talked about it all night, but I would leave with them to see themselves beyond just that moment, just to see themselves beyond the entity of who they are and what they can personally accomplish, to how well they can build the next generation, the next group of leaders that follow them, from your personal children and how you impact them to, how you're impacting the next generation of leaders overall. And so for me, education is a perfect setting to make sure that I'm not just serving myself and my own personal needs and goals, but I'm establishing things that can be felt and the impact can still be measured after I have finished my time or finished my assignment. I've served in various different roles within education, and so my goal is to always leave that particular school, that particular district in a place where I have made a difference that extends beyond me. And so that would be the message that I tell them, to look beyond yourself, and look more so at the impact and the legacy and the lives that you've changed. You have those final moments where you're reflecting on your life. Measure it by how well you've impacted and influenced others in a positive way.
Thank you, and that is well said and a great point. As we go forward in this journey, because you know our time here, as one of my mentor said, that the service we provide is the rent we pay for our time on earth.
Mm.
As you stated, that we should give and make things better, because we are there, and that's how we should measure our lives, not just what we accomplish, but the impact that we make to those closest to us, those in our community, and those in the extended community. Because I strongly believe that what we're here for, to serve, to make an impact, and to make things better, because we are here. So, Dr. Moore, man, this is a great conversation. I know we were going to have a great conversation. Um,
All right.
so it's a pleasure, having you here. But if you have any final words that you want to share with the listeners, please do, before we end this conversation today.
I would just say to all the listeners, hopefully you found something that inspired you. But if not, take a moment to think about what your impact is. Be intentional. The only thing that we can't get back is time. Time is probably our most valuable resource. What you do with the time that you've been allotted, in whatever capacity that is, in life in general, in a particular role that you're serving on a job, your time in college, if you're a college student, time matters. And what you do with time is going to impact you beyond that moment, so that you can be a part of a movement. So don't take it for granted. Think about what you're doing. Be intentional about who you give your time to, what you give your time to, how much time you invest in certain activities and certain thoughts and certain patterns and habits. Being intentional is about really thinking about, how am I going to invest my time, my energy, my resources into making things better. So I hope tonight you have been inspired to do that, that we all take an inward look at ourselves and reflect on how well we are making a difference in today's society. And that we take the moment to be more intentional, to be more thoughtful, to be more strategic about how we can take the time that we've been blessed and fortunate to have and get the most benefits, to reap the most benefits from, and being stewards over that time. So I've enjoyed this time that we've had tonight, and just being able to reflect on some of the questions that you've posed to me to sharpen my perspective and how I can go back in tomorrow and say, hey, I need to tighten up in some areas, and be more intentional on making an impact.
Man, thank you, and that's well said, and a great reminder to all the listeners. And as always, the goal is to bring guests here that we believe will make a difference. Thanks for being here with us. And as always, the Black Male Impact is where positive changes are inspired.
Thank you.